Hello everyone, welcome to MedCrunch. I'm Zishan, and in this video we'll be talking about the brachial plexus. So what is brachial plexus? Plexus means network. So it's a network of nerves which is formed by the ventral rami, which are the branches of the C5 to T1 spinal nerves. So what are spinal nerves? So let's have a look. Okay, so what we see here is a cross section of the spinal cord. Dorsally, we have the dorsal gray horn. Ventrally, we have the ventral gray horn. From the dorsal gray horn arises the dorsal root of the spinal nerve. From the ventral gray horn arises the ventral root of the spinal nerve. Now both the roots join together and form the spinal nerve. Since we are talking at the level of the C5 vertebra, we have the C5 spinal nerve forming. Now each spinal nerve branches off and forms a ventral ramus and a dorsal ramus. Now it's this ventral ramus which forms the root of the brachial plexus, as we saw in the first slide. It's the ventral rami of the C5 to T1 spinal nerves which takes part in the formation of the brachial plexus. Now, the same way, we have the C6 spinal nerve arising from the C6 vertebra, C7 spinal nerve arising from the C7 vertebra, and C8 spinal nerve arising from the C8. Wait a second. Do we have a C8 vertebra? No, we don't have a C8 vertebra. So the question is, how come this nerve is coming here? From where is this nerve arising? The answer lies in this picture here. Here we can see the cervical vertebrae and some of the thoracic vertebrae. So what happens is that C1 spinal nerve root arises above the C1 vertebra, C2 spinal nerve root arises above the C2 vertebra, C3 spinal nerve root arises above the C3 vertebra, and this story goes on until we reach C7. What happens at the level of the C7 vertebra is that we have the C7 spinal nerve root arising above the C7 vertebra, but we also have a C8 spinal nerve root arising below the C7 vertebra. So this is the peculiarity that we must remember always. Due to this, there is no space left for the T1 spinal nerve root to arise above the T1 vertebra, so whole sequence changes below this, and we have the rest of the spinal nerve root arising below their respective vertebrae. That is, T1 spinal nerve root arises below the T1 vertebra, T2 spinal nerve root comes off below the T2 vertebra, and so on. Okay, now that you have an idea about the spinal nerves, let's move on to the next point. The brachial plexus extends from the root of the neck to the axilla. Here we can see the root of the neck, all the way it goes to the axilla. It provides motor and sensory innervation to the shoulder, arm and hand. Moving on, we have the components of the brachial plexus. In the components, we have the roots, the trunks, which lie in the root of the neck. We have divisions, which lie behind the clavicle, as we can see in the picture here. And then we have cords that lie in the axilla, here. In this slide, we'll take a look at the diagrammatic representation of the brachial plexus. So here we have the roots, the trunks, divisions and cords of the brachial plexus, and then we'll also be talking about the terminal branches of the brachial plexus. You can remember them by the mnemonic, remember to drink cold beer. Okay, so first we have the spinal nerve C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1. It's the ventral rami from the spinal nerves that form the root of the brachial plexus. So we have the root from the C5, root from the C6. They join together and forms the upper trunk. Then we have the C7 root alone forming the middle trunk. And now we have the C8 and T1 root joining together and giving us the lower trunk of the brachial plexus. Now each trunk gives two divisions, an anterior and a posterior. The anterior division from the upper trunk and the anterior division from the middle trunk join together and give us the lateral cord. Then we have the anterior division from the lower trunk forming the medial cord. Now we have the posterior divisions coming from each trunk which join together and form the posterior cord. And these cords, they are named based on their relations to the axillary artery. Okay, in this transverse section, we can see the boundaries and the contents of the axilla. Now here we can see the axillary artery in the center contained in the axillary sheath. So the cord that lies in front and slightly medial to it is the medial cord. The one that lies lateral to it is the lateral cord, and the one Posterior to it is the posterior cord. Let's see the branches that arise from the brachial plexus. Here we have the dorsal scapular nerve arising from the C5 root. We have branches from the C5, C6 and C7 joining together, forming the nerve to serratus anterior. Coming to the trunk, we have nerve to subclavius arising from the upper trunk. And we also have a suprascapular nerve arising from the upper trunk. Now coming to the lateral cord, what we need to remember is LML. This will remind us of all the branches that arise from the lateral cord. So we have lateral pectoral nerve, musculocutaneous nerve, and lateral root of the median nerve. So here we have the median nerve, here we have the lateral root that forms the median nerve. Then coming to the posterior cord, we have the mnemonic LU nerve. L stands for lower subscapular nerve, U stands for upper subscapular nerve, N stands for nerve to latissimus dorsi, A stands for axillary nerve, and R stands for radial nerve. For the medial cord, what we need to remember is 4MU. That means 1M stands for medial pectoral nerve, the second one stands for medial cutaneous nerve of arm, third M stands for medial cutaneous nerve of forearm, and the fourth M stands for the medial root of the median nerve, which joins with the lateral root of the median nerve, forming the median nerve, and the U stands for ulnar nerve. And the key to remember the terminal branches that arise from the cords of the brachial plexus is MARMU, marmu. Now let's have a look at the root values of the various branches. From roots, we have dorsal scapular nerve. Its root value is C5, we can see here. Then we have nerve to serratus anterior. Its root value is C5, C6 and C7. We can see here C5, C6 and C7. Then from trunk, we have suprascapular nerve. Its root value is C5 and C6. We can see here suprascapular nerve. And it's coming from the C5 and C6, which forms the upper trunk. Then we have nerve to subclavius. Its root value is C5 and C6, again from the upper trunk. In the last slide, we can see the branches coming off from the various cords, and we'll be discussing their root values. From the lateral cord, we have lateral pectoral nerve, musculocutaneous nerve, and lateral root of median nerve. All of their root values are C5, C6 and C7. You can see in the picture that C5, C6 and C7 take part in the formation of the lateral cord, which gives these branches. Coming to the medial cord, the root values of all the branches are C8 and T1, except ulnar nerve, which has C7, C8 and T1 as its root value. In the posterior cord, all the branches have their root values as C5 and C6, except two nerves. They are nerve to latissimus dorsi and radial nerve. Nerve to latissimus dorsi has C6, C7, C8 as its root value, and radial nerve has C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1 as its root value. And that's brachial plexus in a nutshell. Thank you for watching, everyone. And please don't forget to download the flashcards from the description below, and see you in the next one.